Today on Locked On Red Wings, with the deadline passed and playoff hopes gone, we take a step back and ask, where is the Red Wings rebuild at?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I am a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ news radio podcast, while Scott is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today, guys, as I said in the cold open, it's an off day, so we have an opportunity to really take a step back here after, unfortunately, a slew of negativity just around how these last couple of weeks have played out after a huge high. We were high on success for a while there, but the Red Wings are out of the playoff race. They've traded away a lot of the assets at the deadline, so moods are down, and I understand it. My mood is down a lot, Scotty. It's unfortunate, but that's where I feel I'm at right now, is just kind of disappointed. And you brought up yesterday, at the end of the yesterday's show, that you kind of wanted to use this off day episode to take a step back and almost remind people that big picture wise, this team is still progressing and, at a pretty good pace.
Yeah. I think that it was just like you said, off day. We got to talk about yesterday the individual trades in a vacuum, good value, bad value, etc. And I think that it's also important, maybe even more important, to have the discussion of where the Red Wings are at just in the timeline of this rebuild. I mean, if you are someone who is on social media and goes online a lot, I mean, you saw a lot of varying takes and a lot of different opinions on just reactions to the moves that happen at this deadline. And so I just wanted to have kind of a discussion with you and just with the people about that, because it's fascinating to me how many varying opinions there, really can be about where the Wings stand post deadline. And for me personally, I view the deadline as a necessary win, and I don't view this as a step back as far as the rebuild goes at all. I don't think the trajectory has changed. I don't think that this is like rebuild 2.0. I don't think that they blew it up and are starting over again. I think everything they did was completely necessary. I think they absolutely hindered themselves for the remainder of the 2022-2023 season,
Which
obviously.
could be a blessing in disguise.
As far as timeline goes, how soon everyone expected to be competitive again, and just where the Wings are at in this timeline and, trending up or trending down, I still personally absolutely view this team as the direction didn't change over the weekend for me, I guess is what I'm trying to say, at all. I still have the exact same timetable in my head. I still think that they're heading in the right direction. I still think they're trending up. And I think that what they did on Friday and Thursday, I guess, was just necessary. And I don't view it as a hindering of the timeline at all.
Yeah. So I, for one, like usual, I'm in agreement with you. I'm aligned with you. And I understand it, where a lot of the frustration and where a lot of the people are coming from, because I actually kind of share that mindset in a way, and that I can get why people think that it was a step back in the rebuild. And I say that because when we talk about cores and what a core of a hockey team is, I mean, we were sold on the idea, myself included, that Tyler Bertuzzi and Phil Peronic were part of the cores of this team, given their age. And they were. But they were part of a core of a rebuilding team. And by the time, as this rebuild is progressing, we can clearly see that when this team is competitive, Tyler Bertuzzi especially, Not so much Philip Hronek, as I think that was just he got offered an absolute haul and couldn't turn it down. But we're looking at a team that would be closer to 30, a core that would be closer to 30 in regards to Dylan Larkin, Philip Hronek, and Dylan Larkin, Tyler Bertuzzi, Philip Hronek, Dylan Larkin. That would be closer to 30 by the time they're ready to compete. And that doesn't leave you a very long window to compete. And so I think Yzerman made the decision to decide that, okay, well, clearly this isn't going to be right. We're not ready to compete in the next couple of years. I hate to say that, but maybe not even the next couple of years. It could be. We've seen how fast turnarounds can be for teams like, I don't want to say the Buffalo Sabres, as they've restarted their rebuild a couple of times, but how they've kind of come out of nowhere, it seems, this season after just one or two key additions in like Tage Thompson, for example. So it feels as if Steve Yzerman said that this core is not the core. He's going to build around the core of his own draft picks. And I bring back the fact of the matter that the Red Wings, of Yzerman's picks on the Red Wings, there's only two guys right now. Three, if you want to count Soderblom, who played a good chunk of the season before getting ultimately sent down to Grand Rapids. We have yet to see the fruits of Yzerman's labor at the NHL level, but that's not to say that they're not coming. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in segment 2 a little bit, and we'll flex about how good some of these Yzerman draft picks are playing. And that doesn't always translate to the NHL level, but it feels like the help is on the way. But it's very clear to me that Yzerman has decided that obviously Larkin's part of the core. He signed him for 8 years, and you need that rock, that stability, that guy to build around, that veteran leader. He is that veteran leader in the locker room. It feels like he's still so young, but in comparison to Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, I mean, Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond are part of that new core. He's going to build around the core of 25U players instead of the 30U players. That's clearly, in my mind, what his mindset is right now. He quite literally is trying to build this from the ground up and doesn't really care about who was here before, it seems. And that sounds almost cold, and I'm sure that's a little bit hyperbolic. I'm sure he cares very much about them because, again, they're people, not pieces. But I think I think that's the idea. Is it's not a teardown. I think was the goal for a long time, was my pieces are going to be the core. And if you guys work out and pan out long-term, great. But my guys are going to be the core.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth in that. The really interesting thing about it is I keep going back to the conversation about the timeline because, I mean, even you mentioned there, like maybe the trade deadline is a sign that, or a signal that we're still a couple of years away from, I guess everyone's definition of competing is a little bit different, but I mean, last offseason, okay, just this one that just passed, right? Going into this year, we had said this year we expected the Red Wings to be one of the better teams to miss the postseason and kind of be just on the outside looking in. And then we said that next season was going to be the year in which I think the fan base should expect postseason. I don't have that mindset has not changed for me at all. And
Yes.
I know that, again, we got rid of a lot of guys that, or several guys at least, that a lot of people pointed to and assumed or thought was going to be on the team next year. Obviously, Hronek being the biggest one, but I think a lot of people, maybe not lately, but last offseason probably still assumed that Bert maybe could get a deal worked out. And, Verana certainly people thought was more of a longer term option. So I understand that they moved a lot of people that at one point people thought were going to be a part of this team for a long time. But with the assets they have and the money that they're about to have and the flexibility that they're about to have this offseason, I truly think that what the Wings did at the deadline just on Friday was a step back for the remainder of this season so that this offseason they could take a big step forward. And that's truly how I view it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I'll add on to that after this break. But first, I got to talk to people today about FanDuel. It's the midway point of the NBA season and NHL season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sometimes I just like adopt a strange accent, a non-recognizable accent when I say words, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. That time it wasn't intentional. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from money line to point scores and even goal scores as well. If you're one of those hockey fans like me. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet on up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are talking about just taking a step back and looking at the rebuild as a whole. And you mentioned timeline, and I agree with you. I mean, the goal of this season is still, finish. I want 85 points or better and finish outside the playoffs. I know current point projections after this 6-game losing streak are now like 84.5 after going all the way up to 90. That's the thing about point projections is they change after every win or loss.
They're fluid, yes.
Yeah. So they're still like right in that wheelhouse. I would like to have seen a little bit more of an improvement on 5-on-5 play, but believe it or not, the power play and penalty kill is better. The team is overall better than it has been last season. So we have seen those improvements year over year. And I agree with you. My timeline is the same. I want to see this team be competitive next season, but that's where the problem lies. Is I say these things because my patience begins to wear thin. It's year 7 or 8 now since the Red Wings have made the playoffs and this rebuild has began. And I know Yzerman likes to say the rebuild didn't begin until he took over because that was the start of his rebuild. And I understand that and I respect that. But as a fan who's been here through, he only witnessed the Yzerman era. We witnessed the end of the Holland era and the Yzerman era. So it's kind of back to back. Yeah, the patience wears a little bit thin. And, the honeymoon phase with Yzerman has certainly been coming to an end, I feel. And I think that's justified. I think people are, we had a whole episode about this. It's perfectly okay to criticize Yzerman on some of the moves he makes. And we have at times too, but I'm also not going to completely turn on him because I understand that rebuilds aren't linear. You've said that 1,000 times, Scotty, and that there is no timeline to success. You take steps forward and you take steps back. I mean, Jacob Vrana, losing him like that, let's admit it, is a step back because of the fact that didn't pan out. You couldn't have predicted that. But Jake Wallman, arguably a step forward. He panned out. So there's going to be that push and that pull as rebuilds go. And it's a lot of it is obviously, smart GMing, but a lot of it is also luck and draft luck because Yzerman has said you have to build through the draft. So while I think it's okay to criticize Yzerman, and my patience is wearing thin and I want this team to compete, I'm not about to turn on him either because there has been outside the Sherratt move. There's yet been a move where I've gone, I don't know about this one, Stevie. Every single move I've on a very base level been like, I can at least understand this. And so I think when you look at the cabinet that's been loaded up, Scotty, right now, I know they're not at the NHL level yet, and we want to see them at the NHL level, but the cabinet is loaded up. And that's something that national pundits keep talking about. I mean, NHL Network, one of their pundits said that the Red Wings were one of the winners at the deadline because they sold and got so much. And then also, we are constantly touted as having one of the best U22 pools. And that's fantastic. I mean, again, like that's great to hear. Again, that means diddly squat until they're making an impact at the NHL level. But when you take a step back, like there's still a lot to be excited for. We just have to continue to have patience despite the fact that it's wearing thin, admittedly, again, with myself included.
For sure. And I guess that was the point I was trying to make before the break there was like, I don't think anyone should compromise their patience just off of the deadline. Like for me, it literally does not change the timeline at all. I think it is extremely reasonable and possible to go into this offseason to use all of the draft capital you've had to draft players you like and use them. And then instead of drafting 5 players in the top 40 or 45, draft players you like and then use the access picks you have of players spots you don't necessarily need, and go out there and get NHL talent with those draft picks. And you're going to have cap because you didn't re-sign Burt. And a lot of people, we talked about the Vrana situation, retaining some of that salary. The UFA is already coming off the books. Like you're going to have cap space, you're going to have cap flexibility, you're going to have player flexibility, and you're going to have assets in the draft, all which can be used to, even in a much more shallow free agency market, still improve this offseason. I mean, genuinely, that's what the thing I keep going back to is, this conversation about the Wings, whatever, taking a big step back, or it feels like we just are rebuilding again, and it's like this is still the same timeline for me. This was all necessary stuff. That it's all outside of Hronek. It's all UFAs that weren't going to come back. Do you want to just like trade them for nothing, like hold on to them for nothing rather, and then like miss the postseason anyway? I mean this is what you had to do. And a comment you made earlier, just like bringing back up what is the core of this team. I think if you're looking at the NHL roster, and you and I talked about this a little bit off air yesterday as well, but like if you're looking at the NHL roster, just say out loud what you think the core of this Red Wings team is. I think it's currently like the unbreakable core. Now, that doesn't mean that only these players can be here when this team is good again, but the undeniable core that they are building around, I think, is only a three-player long list. And I think it's Seider, Raymond, and Larkin. And again, that's not to say that there aren't assets on this team. Berggren has looked really good. He can be here when this team is competitive again. Obviously, Zadina is super controversial. Veleno has had a solid year. Like that I'm not. Wallman obviously extended, like can certainly play his way. But when you're talking about the pure, like unmovable core that you are undeniably building around, I think it's only a 3-player long list, and that kind of makes everybody else on this roster somebody that you look at and go, okay, well, like what's the best value here?
Yeah. Like you can be a part of a core. Like again, Tyler Bertuzzi and Phil Hronek were part of the core of this hockey team, but they weren't. The cores can change. Cores can be like a change depending on where the team is at. And again, Tyler Bertuzzi and Phil Hronek were part of a core on a rebuilding hockey team, and they weren't untouchable. And because of that, they were moved, and that stinks. Like again, like. I was so shocked when Hronek got traded, and I'm bummed that Bertuzzi got traded because I loved him so much. I love his style of play. And, part of me still hopes he comes back. But like you said, it's Moritz Seider, Lucas Raymond, Dylan Larkin. That's your unmovable core right now. And if you're going to build on that core, it's going to be guys that aren't even here yet. And again, like you said, Wallman is here for a while. At least we think he's here for a while. I know he has a modified no trade clause, but it's not foolproof. So I mean, anything can happen outside those three guys. So you start to look into like, okay, well, what players in the future can be part of this unshakable core? What players are there in the cabinet that are performing and are on the way? And I mean, I think the conversation starts with, obviously, Simon Edvinsson. Simon Edvinsson right now at the Grand Rapids Griffins, he's 4th on team scoring as a defenseman. He's got 25 points in 46 games played as he begin. I mean, he's looking very comfortable on North American ice, and he's on pace to have almost a 50-point season in Grand Rapids. I mean, that's a huge adjustment after he at times struggled during preseason play. Yeah. He's looked great. And the fact that he's 4th on the team in scoring as a defenseman is really reassuring that he could be a legitimate player on this hockey team when the time comes. We might see him in the last 10 games of the season. I don't think they want to burn the first year of the ELC yet, so they'll hold him to that 9-game maximum.
Yeah, we'll play 9 games this year, yeah.
But I mean, it starts there, right? And then you could continue and be like, hey, there's tons of other prospects, Scotty, that we can look at as are having banger years.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that the conversation obviously starts with Edvinsson, and I would not be shocked at all if he played exactly 9 games at the NHL level this year. And then I think that's a fun conversation for this offseason. What do you do on the blue line in the offseason? How much do you add on the blue line, and how much can we assume that Edvinsson is going to be on that defensive core on opening night?
Absolutely. So when we come back, Scotty, we'll continue the conversation. We'll look in a little bit deeper into that cabinet, and maybe not talk about guys who are like going to be future untouchable pieces of the core, but just prospects in general that have been just an absolute pleasant surprise this season, and some of which haven't been a surprise, and we just knew they would tear it up. But just to reassure you guys that the future has yet to come. The Red Wings, Steve Yzerman's Red Wings isn't here yet, and they're making big waves at the level they're at, and the optimism is still there. You just got to look beyond the current losing streak. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about Athletic Greens. Our next partner is a product you got to use literally every day. Start taking AG1 because with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food-sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. The special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all those things. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, and gluten-free, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar while still tasting so good. And it costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit and has over 7,000 5-star reviews. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Segment 3, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. Scotty, let's continue this conversation. So we're talking about guys in the cabinet who could be part of this unshakable core. And we named, obviously, the 3 that are on the Red Wings right now who are absolutely part of that core. And we were kind of going down the list of guys who could be there and trying to revitalize the fan base after some unfortunate losing streak and you controlling your own destiny and whatnot. We named Simon Edvinsson. I think he is the most obvious no-duh statement. But there's another guy who Red Wings fans were starting to sour on, and then sneakily here, and only sneakily if you haven't been paying attention, but if you've been paying attention, he's been fantastic. Scotty, who's kind of been tearing it up lately?
Well, I mean, yes, we're going to talk about one dude specifically, but that entire roster has been an absolute fuego. The Toledo Walleye have won, at the time of this recording, 13 straight hockey games, which is unbelievable. And Sebastian Cossa has been in net for 7 of those 13, and he is 7-0-0 in that stretch. It's actually really convenient. Right before we started recording, the Red Wings did us a huge favor, and we were already going to talk about this anyway. Then they tweeted out his stats over his 7-game win streak. Since February 8th, so this is almost a month, but it's 7 starts. He has 3 shutouts, a .969 save percentage, and a 0.86 goals against average. He also is tied for the lead in the ECHL with 4 shutouts on the year. Also, in his last 6 starts, he has allowed 0 or 1 goals in each of his last 6 starts. He is on another planet currently, and that is I'm assuming, very key in the Walleyes' just entire crazy run here where the team has won 13 straight games.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, about Sebastian Cossa. Everyone was down on him, especially it started when he was the 3rd string goalie on Team Canada. As people are like, correct, maybe Stevie messed up, because obviously, I mean, actually, you could probably go back to the draft and you and Nolan being there. Everyone was ready to take, oh my God, I'm drawing Jesper Wallstedt.
Jesper Wallstedt, yeah.
And he was the guy because he was more ready. He was more mechanically sound. But Stevie likes his big guys with athleticism, and he took a chance on him, hoping that he could improve the technique on Sebastian Cossa. And he struggled early this season with Grand Rapids and Toledo, but recently he's been on a tear, as you just noted. So don't be out on Sebastian Cossa. And I'll argue, Scotty, that not only could he be a piece of this team's core, I would argue he needs to be a piece of this team's core, because this team needs a starting goalie.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that there is it's so difficult now to get your hands on one of those like top end goalies, especially if it's not through just drafting and developing. You know what I mean? Like, so seldomly are goalies like traded, or I mean, really outside of like Bobrovsky, like there's not even too many big like free agent acquisitions with goalies leaving teams and whatnot. Like, teams really do, when they find a goalie that's good, they lock that dude down. And so I think that it's super important for Cossa to be a starting caliber goalie for this team going forward. And like that's not going to happen next year. Like he's still in
No.
Toledo, but I do think that long term big picture that's a really and I know like we're talking now again about like years down the road for guys like Cossa and whatnot, but I do think that he's going to be super important to this team going forward. And if they can find another goalie just right now to have a nice little 1-2 punch at the NHL level, because like Husso's been really solid this year. If they can just kind of naturally transition from Husso, a legitimate second goalie, and then in whatever it is, 2 years, give or take a year, Cossa getting added into that mix, that'd be super helpful.
I mean, he's got 164 saves and 3 goals against in the last 10 games.
That's ridiculous.
That's pretty good. So, yeah, that's one guy for sure. Scotty, who else are we looking at right now as not maybe necessarily pieces of the core, but just to prove that cabinet's still full? We haven't seen anything yet, really.
Well, I mean, where do you want to go next? I mean, we can go to Lombardi, just scored his 40th goal for Flint.
I think that's the sexy conversation for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
man.
I think he's fourth in the league.
The Flint, man, that's a fun way to watch a hockey game. I love it up there.
He's fourth in the league right now, third in the league. I'm sorry, third in the league in scoring with the OHL. With the Flint Firebirds, 86 points in 60 games, 41 goals, 45 assists. So doing it on both ends.
Yeah, he already has a 40-40 season, like before the 70th game. Yeah.
Incredible. And so he's just been, obviously the OHL is still, it's not professional. It's major junior hockey.
Yeah.
So there's still a huge gap, like once he makes that leap to pro. But this was a guy, and the reason it's so exciting to look at him this way is because he was a 4th round pick. It's a middle round pick. Yeah. And he's 19. Good point. So, and he plays center, which is
right. He's 19 years old, and at 18 with Flint last year, he was just under a point a game. So, like, I mean, this is a guy that I think is a lot of people should be excited about for sure.
I mean, obviously, we didn't even talk about Marco Kasper, as he's been one of the best U20 players over there in Sweden. Wallender's taking steps forward. Albert Johansson, I'm really high on as well.
There's some people out there that think Johansson might get a look at the end of this season. Even
I hope he does, because we need more right D-men. And he's been really good with them. But then if you go to the collegiate level, you got Carter Mazur, who is 30th in the NCAA in scoring. He's over a point or just under a point per game, 35 points in 36 games on an absolutely stacked University of Denver team. But another guy that doesn't get a whole lot of attention is Robert Mastromone with Arizona State. He's 20th in NCAA in scoring. He's got 39 points in 36 games. He was a 2nd round pick in 2019, which was the first year of Steve Yzerman's tenure. So he's been a guy who's been doing pretty well. Doesn't have an ELC yet, but he might be earning one at the end of the season. Same with Mazur. So like there's guys, and there's so many other prospects that are playing well. Not every single one's going to make the NHL level and make a splash, but we haven't seen hardly of any of Yzerman's picks at the NHL level. And I think once you start seeing the fruits of that labor, then we can start making the decisions on whether or not to get impatient, which, I mean, it says a lot because like I said earlier, I'm already starting to get impatient, but like there's a difference between me being impatient and wanting it and me like actually like, okay, well, Stevie, you got to start doing something now because these guys aren't working out. And we're not at that point yet where things aren't working out.
For sure. And much different conversation, but I really do think that his asset management this offseason is really where a lot of people, myself included, will probably draw the line in the sand, right? Like if he's using all of the assets and the flexibility that he created at the deadline this offseason to take another big step forward, then I think it'll kind of reassure a lot of the fan base that, hey, this team is headed in the right direction. But if it's a more of a lackadaisical, they use all the picks, there's no trades, and they aren't able to add too much in a pretty shallow free agency, then I'm going to be a lot more I'm going to be a lot more on board with the flip side of things if this offseason is a super quiet one. But I just think in a vacuum, this trade deadline did not take a step back. It's this offseason that has the potential to do that, not the deadline. I guess that's my kind of summary of the last 30 minutes.
I mean, yeah, my final thought on this, Scotty, is just that things are still looking good. And it's hard to see every single day when you're here every single day, but things are still going to be good in the long run. We just got to continue to be patient because we haven't, again, I keep hammering home, we haven't seen anything yet. We really haven't. So that's where I go. Final thoughts for you.
We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow and a game preview. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. To your team every day.
Every day.